Hello, and welcome back to a very special 100th episode of the Masonic Roundtable, a weekly hangout where Masons from around the world get together to talk about Masonic news and opinions in a friendly and social manner. The thoughts and opinions expressed here are solely the opinions of the participants and do not represent any Grand Lodge statements or positions. Make sure you keep your conversations open for the public and on the level. To interact with us, especially on this very special episode tonight, send questions and comments to our Twitter page at Mason Roundtable or on the Facebook event page for episode 100, Racism in the Craft. As usual, I'm one of your hosts, John Ruark, past master of the Patriot Lodge number 1957 in Fairfax, Virginia. I'll introduce the other hosts, starting with Jason Richards.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 100. My name is Jason Richards, and I am the Senior Warden of Acacia Lodge number 16 in Clifton, Virginia.
Thank you, Jason. Juan Sepulveda.
Hello everybody, Juan Sepulveda from Orange Blossom Lodge number 80 in sunny Kissimmee, Florida, and the host of the Winding Stairs Freemasonry podcast.
Thank you, Juan. Robert Johnson.
Sorry, mic mute. Robert Johnson, the past master of Waukegan Lodge number 78 in Waukegan, Illinois, current secretary, and host of the Whence Came You Masonic podcast.
Thank you, Robert. Last but not least, sharing his camera tonight, Nick Johnson.
Hi, Nick Johnson, past master of Corinthian Lodge number 67 in Big Time Farmington, and I also run the blog millennialfreemason.com.
Excellent. Thank you very much, guys. We will introduce our special guests here in just a moment, but let's get some administrivia out of the way and start with episode 100 is the culmination of what we've been building up for since right before Christmas. Our Sparklight campaign. Jason, will you kick off our Sparklight discussion and conclude with our winners?
Absolutely, John. Hey, everybody, for the past several months now, we have been throwing bookmarks in your collective faces and saying, hey, we are really interested in books that have made a profound impact on your lives, and we know other brethren would be interested in the same. So get one of our bookmarks, take a picture of a book with it that has had a profound impact on your life, submit it to us with a reason why, and we will go ahead and draw a winner. This is actually the second time we've done this. Last year we were able to go and have lunch with Brother Joseph Schultz. And had a great time. So this year we went ahead and we picked not only one winner, but we also picked up two runners-up who are going to get a little something as well. We were really excited about everyone who pitched in. We had a lot of really, really cool books displayed. So without further ado, we will congratulate Brother Luke Shorty from Maine. He sparked light with the book Quadrivium, the four classical liberal arts of number, geometry, music, and cosmology. And so congratulations, Luke. John and I will be in touch at some point soon to get your address, and at some point over the next month or two, we will send you a boatload of crazy stuff. So you're all the way up in Maine, so it's highly unlikely that we are actually going to be able to get up to see you in person. However, we do owe you a drink if you're ever down in the area here. So we also want to congratulate Ed Walnick and Chris Streeper, who are the runners-up for the Sparklight campaign.
That's right, we have runners-up this time.
And we have to give a very special thank you to Brian and JR from the band Fellowcraft. They have a brand new album that is yet to be released. It'll be released soon, and they have offered to give our winner and each of the runners-up a free downloadable copy of their brand new album. So Ed and Chris, I'll be reaching out to you as well to get your email addresses, and then Brian and JR from Fellowcraft are going to go ahead and send you a free download copy of their new album, Get Up Young Phoenix. It's really great. I've listened to it a little bit. It's really cool, really grungy, and it's just neat to see a bunch of brothers band together and make music together. So for those of you who didn't know, Brother J.R. McDonald, who is the lead singer, songwriter, and guitarist of Fellowcraft, actually worked with me on the intro and outro music to the Masonic Roundtable's podcast. So you've heard him before, and he does some really great stuff on this album. We're all really excited, and we're going to have Fellowcraft on the show sometime in the future. So thanks again to everybody who took the time to submit books and write a little bit about why they're so important to them. You know, we as Masons are always searching for more light in Masonry, and books are an infinite source of knowledge and wisdom. So thank you all so much. We really appreciate you being willing to share those, and we will most likely do this again. So stay tuned, and I'm sure we'll have another running at some point soon. Back to you, John.
Thank you, Jason. A couple other little things you may have heard on Robert Johnson's podcast this week, where he announced the big announcement that we will be in Elizabethtown, Pennsylvania on March 19th. And when I say we, it's not the royal we. It is all 5 of the hosts of the Masonic Roundtable will be in one place at one time for the first time ever.
Well,
I think that the universe may implode into that spot. We'll find out. It should be a good thing. This is put on by the PA Academy of Masonic Knowledge. It's a Grand Lodge sponsored event, and from what I hear, it's a well-attended event. And if you can make it, if you can, within driving distance to, it's right outside of Harrisburg, PA. We encourage you to show up and have good fellowship and good brotherhood.
And even if you have to fly, you know, we are okay with you spending the money to fly to our show.
right.
Actually, you're joking, but I've already heard of brothers that might be flying over.
Sweet.
Yes.
Yep.
Awesome.
Looking forward to it. And last but not least, big announcement, late-breaking announcement from Facebook. A longtime friend and listener of the show, and also the creator, brainchild behind Masonic Radio Theater, Bill Hostler, got engaged today. So congratulations, Bill, and TMR sends our condolences to Tammy.
Hey, John, were we going to talk about what we did over the weekend as well?
What did we do over the weekend? Go ahead.
All right. So in a new experience for all 5 of us, we had the privilege of being asked to join in a discussion on everything from gun control, FEMA death camps, aliens, Masonic symbolism, Lucifer, Baphomet, and the Illuminati on the Leak Project on YouTube, which is the ultimate tinfoil hat wearing YouTube show. So they asked us on. We had a great discussion. Rex, the gentleman who runs it, actually asked us because he's had some good experiences with Masons, and he wanted us to come online and demystify the fraternity. So we have a really good discussion on a lot of crazy stuff, and then an amazing discussion on hidden symbolism and the philosophy that you get out of Masonry. So go and check it out. It's got a little bit of crude language here and there, so you know, if you're watching it in the company of youths and at work, beware.
Hide your kids, hide your wife.
Yeah, you really don't want to miss it. It is very entertaining. Brother Rex, I mean not Brother Rex, but our good friend Rex. He was very respectful about the history and the craft, and he was very inquisitive. There were a lot of very good questions, some that we weren't ready for, and you'll see that. But I'm pleased with how it turned out. Please don't miss it. Go find the Leak project on YouTube, and I'm actually going to put a link to it on the Masonic Roundtable events page as well, since most of them are there.
And we'll put it on the website in the show notes for this episode as well.
Yep, great. Now it's time to get a little serious. We've had a lot of fun with that, and congratulations to the Sparklight winners. But now,
And to Bill.
And to Bill, even to Bill. I want to do an additional disclaimer before we get rolling in here. This is going to be a sensitive topic, but it's going to be a great topic because we're going to be open and honest. We got a lot of good brothers here. They're going to share their thoughts and opinions, and now's the time to do it. The guest tonight have come willingly and openly to progress the cause of the craft. Their stories and opinions are based solely on their anecdotal experiences, right? So you can't say anything about, you disagree, this is what happened to them, right? So this is purely based on their own experience of the craft. Some ground rules for everyone here, as usual: be respectful and honest. It's, has to be said. Keep your passions subdued, and to include those interacting on social media. The banhammer will be out, but we don't think we're going to have to use it. Keep me honest, guys. All right.
We're at the ready.
We're at the ready. Now let me introduce our elite panel of guest hosts tonight, starting with Brother Charles Harper, Worshipful Master of Pleiades Lodge number 478 under the Grand Lodge of Illinois, and honorary member of Eternal Light Lodge number 156 of the Most Worshipful Prince Hall Grand Lodge of Illinois, along with African Lodge number 459 and the Internet Lodge number 9659, beholden under the United Grand Lodge of England. Charles, say hello.
Good evening. Good evening. Thank you for having me.
Excellent. Thank you very much for joining us. You're welcome back to TMR, and we look forward to the conversation. Next, we have a friend and brother of Jason and I, Brother Matthew Botts, past master of Diversity Lodge number 330 under the Most Worshipful Prince Hall Grand Lodge of Virginia.
Good evening, everybody.
All right. Welcome back again.
Thank you.
New on the panel tonight is Brother Gabriel Evans, a member of Fidelity Lodge number 10 under the Most Worshipful Prince Hall Grand Lodge of California. Good evening.
Good evening. It's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thanks for joining us. And last but not least, sharing Nick's camera is Brother Joe Gonzalez, Senior Grand Warden of the Most Worshipful Prince Hall Grand Lodge of Minnesota and a dual member of the Minnesota Grand Lodge. Welcome, Joe.
Thank you very much. I do appreciate being with each and every one of you.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. As you can see, we have a very diverse panel tonight. Each of these brothers was selected, one, due to our relationship with them, so we're not going to be able to cover all aspects of this broad topic, but we wanted to let these brothers come on and share some aspects of Masonry that they have a unique take on that has become a part of their lives. So let's get right into the topic at hand. Racism in the craft. Just to start things off, it is 2016 now. Racial relations is a surprisingly still a topic that comes up, and in fact, 2015 has really been a catalyst for a lot of this. When you consider things, events surrounding Michael Brown, Trayvon Martin, and even some of the Islamophobia that's going on. There's a lot of hard issues that our nation, our world needs to address. I think if we had more conversations like we're going to have tonight, a lot of that would be less tense, right? So I also want to start off by saying that if you're not a Mason or if you don't know what Masonry is all about, the short answer is the morals and ethics taught in Freemasonry do not support racism in any way, shape, or form, right? I just want to get that up front. But yet it still exists, and so despite it being completely un-Masonic and against everything we stand for, would you guys say that there are still elements or remnants of racism in the craft? Go ahead, Gabe.
Absolutely. It's sad and it's unfortunate, but it's something that a lot of us, most of us, have experienced, and some who will sit in silence and have experienced it and just refuse to speak on it, but it does exist.
Mm-hmm. And Joe, is that limited to just a black-white issue?
You referring to me?
Yes.
Yeah. No. It's unfortunately because of how the majority population views us versus them. It's us people that don't have very much melanin, and those that have gradations of melanin. And so, unfortunately, that's just the basis of how our society was developed. The U.S. society.
Yes, separation of science, unfortunately. Charles, what would you have to add to that? Do you still think there's an
Well, I
element
think
of that in the craft today?
well, I think there's a great element in the craft. Unfortunately, we see that every time that there is a discussion between Prince Hall affiliated Grand Lodges and the quote unquote mainstream Grand Lodges. We see that all the way down to when a petitioner is trying to decide what lodge he's going to petition, and he's steered towards one lodge or the other, predicated on the color of his skin. So these are common things that happen, and they're most often left unspoken because it's obviously it's not something anybody wants to discuss or admit that it exists, but it's taking place, unfortunately, a lot.
Mm-hmm. Now, again, as I mentioned earlier, one thing that you guys add to this discussion is your individual experience with racism in the craft. And so now's the time where I want to open that up to each of you individually to have the floor and articulate what you have experienced personally, and what were the conditions setting that up. What events caused that to occur, and in no particular order. I'm going to start with Brother Gabriel to tell his story.
All right. Good evening. For my petition a lodge that I happened to be black individuals that was interested in being a member of that lodge, and it was amazing experience, a bunch of love, and that's just what I was accustomed to being brought up into in Masonry. In my travels, because I'm in the military, so while on leave and vacationing, I would visit certain areas, particularly in the South, where I wasn't accepted by certain Prince Hall brothers because I was a member of a predominantly white lodge that wasn't Prince Hall affiliated, and I was told that I wasn't a brother and I couldn't be a brother because I was black, like to my face. Now, mind you, at that time, I was 22, 23 years old, and maybe not as calm as I should have been in my reaction, but I had to subdue myself and my passions. But having those experiences and being very young in Masonry kind of pushed me away a little bit. And once I got back home, they would extend their condolences, but that was just there. So from that point on, I just had a bad taste in my mouth just about would I be accepted if I went somewhere being a black man in a predominantly white lodge that wasn't Prince Hall affiliated. Would I be accepted into, a lodge that had, predominantly black people in it? And that was an issue for me. And it was so much of an issue for me that I ended up leaving that lodge and demitting and being healed over into Prince Hall, because I felt like to be active in Masonry, I wanted to be able to travel and go places without being turned away because of the color of my skin.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, real quick.
Unfortunate.
For the new listeners here, being healed over means that you had to take all the same 3 degrees you already received before, but under the Prince Hall jurisdiction. Is that correct?
Correct. I'd already gone through my processes and all my degrees. I was a Master Mason, and I had to be reobligated, basically, and ceremonially accepted into Prince Hall again, going back over what I've already done. But it wasn't really an issue, and it was unfortunate because I was pushed in that direction. And just in numerous travels, being African American and running into brothers who just didn't look like me, I see a man that appears to be a Mason. I don't look at you and say, well, he's a white brother, or he's a brown brother, or a Mexican brother. I just say, hey, that's my brother. And that wasn't what I was getting, when I was very young in May. Very proud to be Prince Hall. No regrets at all. And we see it on both sides. Neither side is really free from it. We just kind of see those prejudices where a guy come into a lodge and it's majority of black guys, is that person going to be accepted? It's almost hit or miss. And we like to say that in my jurisdiction you would, but maybe in certain areas you may not be accepted, or you may not feel the love and the welcome. And I think it's sad and unfortunate.
All right, thank you for sharing that, Gabe. Just to give other guys a chance, we'll come back to some questions I have for you there, but let's go over to let's do Charles Harper. Why don't you tell your story, if you will?
As some of you may have known, I started out in a clandestine lodge. It was all African American when I started, and upon learning that it was not a regularly constituted lodge, I explored my options of becoming an actual Freemason. And what I was told at that point was that the lodge in the city that I was in was all white, and that they had never had a black member, and they wouldn't accept me. So that was the perception. I ended up petitioning the lodge. I got accepted, and it felt good that my acceptance and eventually being raised as a Master Mason allowed me to disprove the perception of the African American clandestine lodge. And then my first initiation into this a confrontation of cultures, if you will, was after I was raised. I'm standing there on the outside of the lodge, and one of the members, they come to me and they say to me that they're proud to have been present at the raising of the first colored Master Mason.
Oh.
And I was taken aback, but I realized that he was just speaking. He was trying to give a compliment, and he wasn't really understanding that what he was saying in 2010 was offensive. So I took it with a grain of salt. But then as we continued on, because you can't readily see that I'm half black and half white, some conversations are able to be had in my presence that may otherwise not have happened. And so I started hearing stories of confrontations revolving around the ballot box and African Americans coming into the lodge. And I think that ended me into writing that first book of Freemasonry, Black and White, because I started to see these unspoken or these hidden conversations to a greater extent of how racism was existing in a society where it was opposite of what we were being taught. So that was my first engagement in some type of prejudicial conversation, and then ensuing into hearing firsthand conversations of how racism was actually affecting membership of Masonic lodges.
That's amazing. Now let's look at the other side of the coin. Matt Botts, why don't you describe your entrance into Prince Hall Masonry?
Okay. So I actually started out and I tried to petition an AFNAM lodge out of Virginia. Asked for a petition a couple of times. The gentleman that I was going through is a good friend of mine. He just didn't have the time or the petitions handy. Ended up deploying to Afghanistan. He meeting a great man and a friend that I still look to this day. And he and I didn't hit it off at first, but then we hit it off, and I went into his room where we were living at, and he had all his aprons up and everything, and I inquired, and I had a long personal history of studying on the Knights Templar from a historical point of view. So he saw my books that I brought with me and I was reading up on, and eventually he asked me what my intentions were, and I told him that I intended to petition. Ended up not going the AFNAM route, but some great friends and brothers I call to this day in the unit I was with found out that I was interested in knocking, so they sent me on a wild goose chase. And I ended up going to Prince Hall. My lodge, Diversity Lodge, we live our name. We have white, black, Hispanic. I think the only nationality that we don't have and have never had are brothers of Asian descent. Otherwise than that, I mean, currently the the line, and you walk into the lodge and it looks like a Neapolitan ice cream box. I mean, it's just all over the place, and it's great. We are considered we're considered a military lodge by Virginia's Prince Hall standards, because typically I think there's only 2 true lodges in Virginia that have like a very strong and a military quote-unquote background. That's us and another lodge in our district. But I will say that I met Brother Gabe Evans down in South Carolina, in Columbia, South Carolina, when I traveled with a good friend of mine down to see their Royal and Select Grand Chapter get its official charter. And he can attest to this, and he and I have joked about it afterwards. When the gentleman I traveled with, who was on the Royal and Select Grand Conference, walked in, everybody knew him. When I walked in the room, it was like the oxygen was sucked out of the room. And I fielded a lot of questions later on, and it was interesting. My family being a very mixed and diverse family, I feel comfortable in some days being Prince Hall, and some days I don't. And I've had discussions with brothers within Virginia. I travel a lot due to being in the reserves and being working in the DoD. So I've been to lodges in Germany and England and all across the U.S. and I have great friends of mine down in South Carolina where I grew up, and they are, as everybody knows, one of the few states left that don't have mutual recognition between the two. But outside of the lodge, it's all good. But as soon as we start talking about hold on one second. We have personal feelings that conflict with our lodge feelings, and I'm a very firm believer. If you believe one way, it should be that way throughout all aspects of your life. You shouldn't put on a mask or a persona once you step foot in your lodge. If you act that way outside of your lodge, you should act that way inside of your lodge. And I've witnessed acts of overt and covert racism here within Virginia on both sides of the house. It's interesting. I mean, you always hear those stories of a white guy or a black guy goes and petitions the lodge, and because they are not part of the majority, they are ushered to a lodge that is more skin tone prevalent down the street. And you know, if you work with this person and you break bread with this person and everything else, what's to say that they can't be in the lodge with you just because there's a Prince Hall or a mainstream lodge down the street that they may feel more comfortable in? I don't think that should be the case.
Wow.
It's so unfortunate, don't you think?
Very unfortunate. I mean, John said it earlier in the episode. It's 2016. It's not 1916, 1816, or 1116. We have technology. We have groups. We have scholarships. We have schools. We have everything. And racism is still a very much prevalent topic within the United States as a whole. And growing up in Charleston, South Carolina, I still to this day, I mean, it upsets people when I say it, but it's still very much a closet plantation society. You have a lot of folks that are open to a degree until it interferes with their personal well-being, so to speak. You hit that comfort area, and then they clam up.
Robert?
It's interesting that you guys have said, you know, it's 2016. And, like, I know what you mean, but at the same time, I think, are we just making an excuse for how crappy we were to everybody in the past? Was it okay back then? You know what I mean? Like, why is it's 2016 an excuse? You know, it isn't.
That's a good point.
I think socially there has to be an overarching effort to stop looking at each other by the skin of our color. I mean, by the color of our skin. And I know it's been said 1,000 times, but I try as much as possible, and I hope that we all do, to try to see ourselves as just an American or just another, you know, brother of humanity. And granted, there are those reminders that come from people that are less enlightened that try to remind us, oh no, you're different, you know. So ideally, we as an organization are able to somehow lead the charge. So that's why it's so important for us to rid ourselves as an organization from the racism, because if we want to be that beacon of light in front of everybody, we have to lead by example. We really have to rid ourselves of this nonsense.
You know, Juan, you bring up a great point. If I could just interject real quick, you know, I think racism is more of a vessel of what we're talking about for in analyzing social prejudice. You know, and when we desire to just look at ourselves as humans, you know, as we're taught in Masonic philosophy, I think we have to remember that a lot of the prejudice that we either harbor, that we exhibit to others unknowingly, or that's exhibited through racism or any of the other social prejudices, I think we have to remember that, you know, and Robert said with 2016, you know, saying, well, it's 2016, using that as some kind of excuse. You know, we have to remember that a lot of the prejudices that we hold, that we harbor, and that maybe we're not mostly aware of, and we feel confident in exhibiting our beliefs, are things that were taught to us by people that we trust. You know, whether it's through academia, because a lot of prejudices are introduced through were formally introduced through academia, or whether it was mouth to ear. You know, a lot of our practices, even in the fraternity, relative specifically to the United States, you know, it was positioned in our even in the social aspects that we practiced, that there was an isolation between races. For example, you know, you can go back to the Grand Lodge of Illinois, and this is not the case mostly anymore, but you can go back to 1927, 1945, and you can find instances where the minstrel show that was used during segregation was used as a part of lodge entertainment.
Right.
And
I'm going to let you hold that thought real quick.
Yeah.
I want to make sure that Joe had a chance to jump in and describe his story, and then we can open it up to a little bit of the history, why we think we got here. So
Joe, yeah.
So Joe, why don't you share with us what your personal experience has been?
Okay, well, thank you very much. You know, when I first was interested in Masonry, I was always asking brothers in Houston, Texas, white individuals, that I wanted to be part of the Masons. And after I asked them 3 times at a Dunkin' Donut place where they used to hang out, they asked me if I was of Mexican descent. And I said, yeah. Then they said, well, can we have this one lodge for you? It had like a Latin name. That was only for Mexican Americans. So that put like a certain thought in my mind, like, what is this a universal brotherhood or what? Well, going forward, when I was in Minnesota, at the state fair, I asked for information about what now is called mainstream Masonry. But it was, you know, and they got my information and sent me a petition, and I was initiated. Luckily in Minnesota, what's happened is I think back in like was it '89, the 2 Grand Lodges, the Prince Hall Grand Lodge and the AF&AM Grand Lodge, went into some discussion and went to an agreement where they mutually recognized each jurisdiction. Like, for example, like Wisconsin recognizes Minnesota, vice versa. So both Grand Lodges recognized it and allowed for mutual membership, visitation, the whole works. Shortly after I became a Mason, since I had a lot of friends that were African Americans, and I had also petitioned. Well, no, I had got a petition for a Prince Hall Mason, but one of the brothers told me, like, if you get on the other side, get there, and then get me in there too. So I did that, and I followed up, and I petitioned Prince Hall Grand Lodge, and then essentially, because of the recognition, there was no healing. I was just simply made a member, and I've enjoyed the experience on both sides. I have experienced, and I'm glad that the brother Worshipful Past Master was very honest in terms of that you do encounter that intolerance on both sides at times. Okay, But so that's the extent of my my experience. I'd be glad to talk more later.
All right. Well, thank you for sharing that.
Yep.
But it is 2016 for those checking the calendar. So why do we think it continues today? Why do we think we got this far or not that far despite that? Is it a Prince Hall Grand Lodge thing or is it something else? Charles, what do you think?
Well, you know, I was
I was going to introduce you anyway, man. Come on.
it's a combination of both. You know, there is practice segregation. Let's be honest. There's practice segregation both in the Prince Hall Grand Lodges to a certain extent and the mainstream Grand Lodges to a certain extent. I remember doing a lecture in a Prince Hall Lodge once, and I think I was talking about Egypt and Osiris and so forth, and I was connecting the moral lessons, and a brother stood up and said to me, I mean, cut me off in the middle of the lecture and said, "Why don't you go over and say that to those white boys?" And he had missed my introduction being from the Grand Lodge of Illinois. And now, mind you, I had been on the speaking circuit for about 2 years at this point, and this was probably only the second Prince Hall Lodge I had ever been invited to speak in. So he missed the introduction to know that I was with the white boys, and this is the second one I had been in. So what does that demonstrate to me, though? It demonstrates to me that the feelings that are held generationally, right, are still they still surmount what we're taught as Freemasons. Does that make sense? What we're taught emotionally still overrides the rational reality of what is. We have mutual recognition, and you're still sitting here, and you won't necessarily engage another Grand Lodge that is predominantly another ethnicity, predicated on how you perceive the collective of the whole acting. So is it a mutual issue? Most certainly. You know, there's Grand Lodges right now that won't extend mutual recognition predicated on the beliefs of whether an African American can be a Freemason because it says we have to be freeborn. There's Grand Lodges that won't extend recognition to the quote-unquote mainstream Grand Lodges because after several hundred years of exclusion, why do I want the white boys in here now? These are realistic conversations. We're politically correct in the public sphere, but it seems as though unless the consequences of our actions are placed against public scrutiny, we don't really react because we're kind of isolated in our world, and then we become reactive only when we start to look bad.
Mm-hmm. And when we are encouraged to speak wise counsel to a brother, how difficult would it be for us to tell another brother, listen, brother, I think you're looking at this from the wrong point of view. Right. I think you are imposing on yourself the actual difference instead of attempting to breach that gap.
You know, I'll go a step further too. In my own personal experience, that when you're a new Mason, you hold people with a lot of titles in higher regard, right? You really don't get at first that everybody's a brother, right? Mm-hmm. You get most worshipful so and so, right worshipful so and so. You get person of head of this appendant body, and you're like, wow, these guys have been busy. And so when I hear them say something, even if it's something I don't necessarily agree with, I don't want to create any waves. I'm the new guy, and there's, even though we're taught that we should be whispering good counsel into the ears of every brother, I don't think it really sinks in for me, at least for a good 5 or 6 years, that really that applies to everybody. And respectfully, especially being a young Mason, you got a lot of elders too, and I was raised to respect elders as well. So you got elders with titles, and we're obligated to go and make sure that we can correct the ill-informed brethren of their decisions.
Well,
So-
I wanted to jump in here real quick, RJ. Sorry.
Sure, no worries.
To go back to Brother Charles's point on, some Prince Hall Grand Lodges don't want to recognize their mainstream Grand Lodge counterparts. There are a couple grand jurisdictions where non-recognition is still the case just due to tradition, or at least cited as tradition, in the sense that there are some grand jurisdictions that say, well, it is tradition that the younger Grand Lodge petitions the older Grand Lodge for recognition, and that is why we don't recognize X Prince Hall jurisdiction. And for brethren, especially the millennials and the Gen Xers, who we've seen are into meritocracy and not titles and not traditions, it just seems absolutely ridiculous.
I
Completely agree.
So I had I'm not going to mention the guy's name because he's passed away now, and he was a great member of my lodge. But he was one of the people who mentored me, and I grew up in an Italian household with let's just say that the racism you hear in movies like Goodfellas was like in my house. Okay, and so my mom was not that way, and so I grew up very open to everything and never had any issues. But when my mentor told me, he said flat out to me, he said, "There's something you should know. I'm a racist," and he just told me like right out of the blue, and my eyes got real big, and I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Well." I was born, down in Kentucky, and I came up to Chicago when I was 11 years old, and that's how I was raised. I was raised to be a racist, and so he said my daughter married a Hispanic guy, and I didn't like it, but I'll be damned if that guy wasn't the hardest working guy I ever met in my whole life. Now, and he told me like he still has these thoughts. Charles, you brought up a great point about how we were raised somehow just sticks with us throughout, no matter what we're taught in Masonry. And that was, this guy's thing was, he openly admitted to being a racist, and he said, I still have these thoughts every time I see a black guy or a Hispanic guy or whatever. He said, but, I think those things in the back of my head, but I never say them because I know it's wrong. He goes, but I'm still a racist because they're in there. And he never forgave himself for, having those, quote-unquote wicked thoughts. And it was interesting to me to see that, like, he had, really done some self-reflection on that, and that it never left his subconscious.
Well, I think at least he was honest, and then honesty is perhaps one of the first steps to reconciling error.
Yeah, know thyself for sure.
Absolutely.
So,
Being able to do that.
Right. Another thing I wanted to mention too is it's not just a black-white issue. Alluded to earlier that it is also based on religion, right? We have the Christian paradox, right, where there are a lot of lodges that will still hold true to it's a Christian-only organization when it is not, and that can turn people off. And so, even though it's not a racism thing, it can be. And so let's start shifting the conversation towards the other way. Instead of how we got to here, what do we think are some positive steps that we've either seen or can help take to progress the fraternity further? So I'll start with Gabe. What do you think your thoughts are of how we can improve?
Well, honestly, I think that we have to look within ourselves first and acknowledge our own vices. I think we all have vices, but acknowledging our own vices and acting upon it and having open dialogue. When you have issues, just like the brother just stated, that you will recognize, and you need to take cautions to make sure that you don't act on negative things. I think we all have those, I wouldn't say racist thoughts, but negative thoughts in general that could affect the brotherhood and the organization as a whole. I think that we all need to have that integrity, doing the right thing, and whispering that good counsel to our brother, and make sure that we're holding each other accountable for what we say, what we do, how we carry ourselves in and outside of the lodge. And I think by doing that, that will reflect within the organization, and we'll be better off as a whole.
Matt, would you echo that?
I would echo that. I also want to say that as Masons, we need to stop carrying the towing the company line.
Amen.
If one lodge thinks some way, if a Grand Lodge member thinks some way, if it's wrong, it's wrong. I mean,
but it's tradition, man. It's tradition.
And guess what? Traditions change just like your underwear and just like the outside. I mean, traditions, just like rules and everything else, they change. With over time, they change. Very few traditions, very few rules last from the beginning of time. We have no idea what the rules were in the beginning of time because none of us were around. And guess what? We're not going to be around when they change again. Brother Sepulveda, he brought up a good point, whisper wise counsel. That's great when you're one-on-one. In the lodge, there should be no whispering. There should be open discussion, and there should be hard topics that are discussed. I see all the time. We see brothers all the time post on Facebook, talk about it at the bar, talk about it over dinner, talk about it amongst ourselves. I go to a meeting and I talk about, or all we hear is the minutes, the Treasury report, and we get a very poorly thought out lecture. Let's talk about a topic that's going to actually engage the brothers to come. And guess what? If you have a brother that doesn't engage himself, maybe he should find a different place because we should be open. In my lodge, we have a very strong opinion of leave your feelings outside the door, and we all do. Every last one of us.
Good. Once
we walk through that threshold, they're gone. You and I can be arguing all we want downstairs. As soon as we pass the Tyler, we're good to go. We might have arguments inside the lodge that we don't carry downstairs and outside. It's time to get past our prejudices, and you see it every day in society. Society is getting more and more prejudiced, but they have hidden prejudices. You have individuals that come in for job interviews and they have tattoos. Oh, I don't need tattoos, or they have piercings. I don't need piercings, or they may have a checkered past. They may have a checkered past, but if they're on the road to redemption and they've changed themselves, give them a chance. The Senior Grand Warden stated that he felt he met some brothers at Dunkin' Donuts. We do that all the time, and I've seen it here multiple times in my district where you'll have a brother that is an African American, and they will usher him to my lodge. And granted, I'll take him by all means. I'll take him and I'll make him a great Mason. I will teach them everything because I want them to be able to go anywhere and conduct themselves as a man first. And as a man, you have respect for everybody. Men, women, children, the laws, the regulations, everything around. And above all, you have respect for all races.
I think I like to piggyback and expand on what Brother Botts is saying, because I think he hit on a key point, and Brother Juan started it. You know, we are obliged to correct our brother. You know, and another word for that is confrontation. We have to confront them. You know, we're also obliged to confront them in the most friendly manner possible. And I think we don't expound enough on what that entails. You know, there's a certain element of courage that you have to have, a certain element of cultural understanding. You know, we're prejudiced as well. We believe our way of doing something, if we're morally motivated, we think it's a really good way, and we tend to oppress that on others. But we have to be cognizant of how others perceive things. It goes back to the point within the circle and due bounds. If I want to confront a brother Master Mason on a perception that they hold, well, I have to first understand and take time to invest in them and see how they came to conceive that, how they feel about it. And I have to analyze that and then meet them on some sort of level. I have to find a level in which to convey my point to them, in which they'll understand what I'm saying and actually take it in before there's an element of change that they, by their own free will, have to make. So, it's not just correcting our brothers, it's how we correct them. It's tone, it's understanding. There's a lot that goes into that, and I wonder how much do we invest with all this Masonic philosophy that encapsulate how this is to be done. How do we really implement this into practice? Is that being taught?
Right. Joe, you want to build on that?
Sure. Yeah. What I'd like to say is one of the things that will always makes a difference is when you take a proactive stance. And so let's assume that you have a lodge where you're getting individuals of a different ethnicity, a different race. Assist in promoting and helping them take leadership roles instead of just marginalizing them. Because sometimes it's a good old boys club, and the good old boys are always the ones that are like running everything. So we need to open up the space to allow for the gift that each brother brings to the table, and so it's more of a proactive stance. And I've seen that in aspects of in Minnesota Masonry. Well, I've seen it especially with Brother Nick Johnson, who goes out of his way to just be very respectful, be very engaging, be very assisting, and I also appreciate what Brother Charles Harper said in terms of in a certain delicate way to try to teach a brother if he's way off in terms of his intolerance.
So let me ask each of the hosts this before we get to social media. What would be the one specific thing you would tell any Mason who's listening to the show when they see something that doesn't feel right, whether it's an off-color joke, whether it's overt signs of segregation and separation? What would you tell that brother, that friend, that candidate of what they should do to get our craft moving forward? And we'll start with Matt. What would you say?
A closed mouth doesn't get fed. If you keep your mouth closed and you don't speak up, you are a part of the problem.
Amen.
You are propagating the problem.
Mm-hmm. Gabe, you want to build on that?
I can't even build. That was perfect. Ditto. Ditto.
If you see something, say something. Is that it?
That's it. That's it. Check them. Check them right there.
Mm-hmm.
Go pass, go.
Mm-hmm. Anything more corporate, Charles? Anything you want to add bigger than the obvious? Address the problem right where you see it.
Well, I think there has to be a stance against being dismissive of the problem. We get caught up in the romanticism of the craft, and we like to think of how it is, and we tend to dismiss the taboo areas. But we, like I said before, racism is just one extent of the issues. We have Grand Lodges that are prejudicial against religions of members, of sexual preference of members, that all of it have nothing to do with Freemasonry at all. Freemasonry is a byproduct of the Age of Enlightenment, the precursor of universities and their particular divisions of studies. And here we are, almost 300 years later, and within the United States, it's the most divisive institution predicated on a social prejudice. So if we take the stance of that we're going to stop being dismissive of the problem, we can actually acknowledge it, chew it up, eat it, and move on.
Right. Brother Joe, anything you want to add on how can we go forward?
Well, I think that, I forgot who the famous writer was, but getting back to the original issue, that the time of worship on Sundays is one of the most, or in the past, one of the most segregated hours, and it's a reflection. But things are changing. Things are changing, and I just appreciate this forum because it's opening up issues, and we have how many individuals are on this? 80 something. So we're all thinking the same, and we're all on board in terms of trying to make this truly a universal fraternity. And I applaud each and every one of you, especially the individuals that put together this forum. It's wonderful. Thank you very much. I appreciate it so much.
Okay. I think we'll take this time now that we've almost got to our hour mark here let's shift and start answering some of the questions that people have been posting on Twitter and Facebook, and in no particular order. I'm just going to start lobbing these out there, and first one to jump in gets it. Question is asked: when I'm doing an investigation on a petitioner, I tell them there will be men of all religions and race sitting in the lodge. Then I ask them, will this be a problem for them? This question is for everyone. How does your lodge address racial equality to their members or petitioners? Do you let them know that, hey, you might be praying with someone of a different religion than you? How do you handle that up front?
Well, at the AF and AM lodges, whatever the religious faith of the individual, we use that book. So whether it's the Torah, the King James Version, the Quran, or the Bhagavad Gita, whatever the person feels is his volume of law, that's what we utilize. Now, on the other side, in the Prince Hall side, it's always the Bible, and sometimes references made to Jesus. We're trying to change that, because we do have many members, well, some members that are Muslim, like our Grand Master is Muslim.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm proud that my lodge is a very diverse lodge. We have different ethnicities, we have different religions, all in my lodge, and we get along beautifully. But the Senior Grand Master just brought up a point that I always like to, confront members with is, how do you say that it's a Masonic lodge, but then it's allowed for prayers to be said in a specific religious name? It almost seems anti-Masonic, if you will, for an institution such as ours that allows this. And I do understand the cultural aspect of it. Right. Prince Hall himself, and then as you come through civil rights and so forth, Prince Hall Masons most often had to meet in churches, and the two were kind of walked hand in hand, if you will. But at the same time, there has to be a separation between the religious and the fraternal in order to make that walk across the bridge to specific enlightenment, I think. Does that make sense? I'm trying to confront you compassionately
Absolutely.
without stepping on your toes. But I think, like you were saying, I think that's what holds some African Americans back from petitioning even Prince Hall lodges and making them continually the smaller fish in the pond. And they those that seek to move beyond religion and actual this intellectual and spiritual enlightenment, when they hear about what's going on in most of the Grand Lodges, like my Grand Lodge, they say, well, I'm not really interested in Jesus in Lodge. I get that at church. I want to come for some intellectual and spiritual enlightenment. And I think that plays into the narrative that continually perpetuates that divide that we don't like to acknowledge.
Mm-hmm. Another thing I want to add, a few questions were related specifically on the recognition issue. I think, again, we handled mostly a racial aspect on this show, but we can't talk about it without addressing the elephant in the room, which is recognition of jurisdictions.
Dun, 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 dun.
Yeah, without getting into a big jurisdictional kind of thing. I mean, why do we think we still have states that don't recognize their Prince Hall counterpart? Why do we have Prince Halls that don't recognize their mainstream counterpart? What do we think that environment is, and what can we do to help get beyond that?
I think the basis is fear and an unwillingness to accept someone else as an individual, and so it's territorial fear. Definitely. And it's because we've been so used to being separate, not quite equal, and we just kind of feel we're comfortable in that little zone. mean, I grew up as a Blaxican, so I'm already like living in the black culture. No, for real, and the Mexican culture, right?
Yeah,
And then
right.
when I came up to Minnesota, I went to Carleton College. I guess I became like a honorary white man, right? Okay. Okay. But in other words, I'm multicultural. I can function multiculturally in different aspects. Um, and what you find sometimes is fear. I mean, like, it's like someone moves in next door. They're a little different. You fear them. Prejudices develop, and then you allow for that to fester, and then it's bigotry. But thank God for Masonry, because we believe in the level, and we believe in applying these principles of egalitarian principles, toleration, liberality.
Right. I'll agree with that, and I'll also add to that by saying it's got to be based on something other than logic, right? Which we're taught to use logic, because the Grand Lodge of Pennsylvania, when we've had Paul Chamberlain on for a couple of different episodes, he's told you how weird Pennsylvania is, and they have different landmarks. They have different things in their ritual. They omit things in their ritual that we have in ours, and for us to be able, with a straight face, to say we recognize the mainstream Pennsylvania, but we don't recognize maybe a ritual that has more attention to the same landmarks. That's not logical at all.
No.
It's based on something else, and we can again assume or conclude what those things might be, but it's certainly not based on a strict adherence to landmarks and logic, right? Pennsylvania's weird. I think Massachusetts is a little weird too, compared to the rest of CODIS, and so we have to take those disparities into consideration when we try to apply it to the Prince Hall recognition issue. But now let me ask my Prince Hall brethren here: Does Prince Hall want to immediately be recognized by mainstream? I've heard different things about that.
I don't think so.
What do you mean? Come on, why don't they just want to just join in and swim in the same pool?
There's long-standing pride there that I've gotten this far by myself. I don't need anybody's help.
Right.
And I would almost argue that, and you and I have had these conversations on just strict numbers within the craft on the Blue House side. Here within Virginia, Prince Hall has 5,100 active members, dues-paying members across the entire state. For Virginia, the AF&AM side has somewhere upwards of 30,000. And I got into a discussion about plural membership. I think that if we, and to my knowledge, there are probably 90% of the Prince Hall Grand Lodges across the globe don't allow plural membership, even within their own jurisdictions.
Right, that is true.
Here in Virginia, you can, we have a lot of military and government folks, so you can move to D.C. and then move down to Norfolk, still be in the state, but my lodge is now 4 hours away due to traffic. That's my mother lodge. That's where I pay dues to. If we opened up and we had more of a more liberal mindset, especially amongst the Prince Hall brethren, there we said, all right, well, that's my mother lodge, but I can have plural membership with a lodge down closer to where I live. I'm not taking anything away from them, but I pay dues in both places. That's perfectly fine. And to be perfectly honest, I think it would increase our membership. For 15 years, we've seen a steady decline. This is the first year in over 15 years where we haven't had a decrease in membership. And I applaud the lodges across the Virginia jurisdiction for their activeness in recruiting and bringing back those brethren that did not want to come back or had issues of coming back. And our current Grand Master has done a great job of allowing brethren that have either been suspended or went away for XYZ reason to come back. I think across the board, though, we need to change the way we're thinking. Freemasonry is not only a brotherhood, but it's a business. And when you are losing your employees, you no longer have a business. Especially,
I'd like to ask a question. Now that I've got the Senior Grand Warden here, you know,
Yes,
I don't know if the problem is the limited plural membership or the lack of intervisitation and the responsibility of Grand Lodges seeking recognition to answer one another. And I'll elaborate just really quick. I tend to talk a lot. But, for example, there are Grand Lodges that have blanket recognition for all Prince Hall Grand Lodges that establish mutual recognition within their state. Mm-hmm. And it simply takes that Prince Hall Grand Lodge to return recognition in a simple vote to establish that ability to intervisit. You know, you have Texas that just established intervisitation, even though they've had recognition since I believe 2006.
Right.
You know, but you see the consequences of it, though. You start to see the emotions that once they established it, the outcry of Masons that now either African Americans can come into their lodges or they can go and visit, you know, the Prince Hall lodges. You know, I think the problem isn't establishing, I mean, the answer is establishing plural membership. I think the real issue that will resolve more of the problem is to remove the restriction of the inability to intervisit. I mean, even in my own state, I have Prince Hall members that say, "Ben, Brother Harper, I would love to visit your lodge. I need to ask permission first." And I said, "What?" Yeah. I said, "What are you talking about? You need to ask permission to visit. We have mutual recognition." So I wonder what will it take for this, you know, as we start to segue into the resolve of this. What will it take? You know, you have a Minnesota African American past Grand Master. You know, you have other members that are now seeking office in mainstream lodges that are African American. I mean, you look at my friend Oscar Allen. You know, he's seeking to become Junior Grand Warden at the Grand Lodge of New York. You know, I don't even underestimate the amount of back chatter that is going on with African American seeking to become a Grand Lodge member in the Grand Lodge of New York. You know, obviously we won't put that in public media, but you have to wonder the landslide of communication behind the walls that's gonna. But if we had more intervisitation, more mutual recognition established, that wasn't precursored by a fear of being swallowed up by the bigger Grand Lodge, you know, or letting those of another ethnic background visit our lodge, you know, I think that would lend us more to where we used to be, than where we are.
And can we just talk about dual membership real quick? Because one of the things that I've said, and for as long as I've been a Mason, is that if I could become a dual member, Prince Hall and Mainstream Grand Lodge, I would do it in a heartbeat because the experience is completely different. It is so rich on both sides, and it would just be amazing to have that fellowship and be able to bridge that gap between both of those grand jurisdictions.
Well, come to Minnesota. We can make it possible.
Right.
That's going to be a hard sell with my wife.
Yeah. Oh no, we'll just give you a petition for affiliation with AF and AM, and then once you're there, then we'll just do the affiliation with the local Prince Hall, and you're it.
Yes, that's how awesome Minnesota is.
Wow. You got me thinking.
Well, you know, if you become a member of the Internet Lodge 9659, and that Prince Hall Grand Lodge has mutual recognition with the Grand Lodge of his state, you actually can visit a lot more Prince Hall Grand Lodges, even if your specific Grand Lodge doesn't have mutual recognition with Prince Hall Grand Lodges in other states. I'm just throwing that out there.
Okay, Brother Harper. You know, he's just putting that submit. He's putting that submit.
That, and if I joined the Internet Lodge under the UGLE, I would never have to join the Eastern Star.
No.
That's another show.
That's a whole other topic.
You see the benefits?
Robert, go ahead.
Why is I mean, it's like the way you just said that, which was if you do this, You're talking about like
Yes,
having
sir.
to figure out a back door just for Freemasonry.
Exactly. Messed up is
How
that?
expletive deleted up
Isn't it?
that we have to do that.
Yeah. But you know, I think it's important to point out that we should not be complacent with these options or loopholes to be available. I understand that that is one way that it could be done, but it's important. Just like if you look at this as a battleground, and if you are a good general with your with your head in the right place, you try to have these little wins in order to attain more and more ground. The idea in my heart is not that we should have mutual recognition. The idea should be that there should be one masonry. And that's it. That we should, if you're a Mason, and that's it.
That's
Just
it.
in the same way that when I joined Masonry, I thought Masonry was one thing. Come to find out, I joined, and well, if you come across a brother that, a man, of course, if you come across a man that tells you he's here, you gotta say this, you can't say that. You see, if we think about, granted, there's a beauty and there's an honor to the history that precedes us, and we have to, we can't just discard all the culture and history that is behind Prince Hall or other Grand Lodges. We can keep that and honor that, but if we really believe in the tenets of Freemasonry, we move towards one Masonry. And find ways in which we could harmonize. And if we try to do it all at once, it's not going to happen. Just like
Here's a parallel for you, Juan. We had a clandestine Mason infiltrate my English lodge, and I recognized, both I and another brother recognized that this person was indeed a clandestine Mason, and we went to alert the lodge. We said, hey, this guy, he passed the ballot, but he's actually a clandestine Mason. And said, no, he's a Prince Hall Mason. And we were like, well, no, he's not. Just understand this parallel.
Was he international?
The lodge in which they perceive Freemasonry in a man who professes to be a member is beyond contestation. And they were upset at me for bringing some kind of disrepute to his name. And we had to provide evidence before they would even examine that he was not a lawful member of the craft.
Right.
And then after all of that, only then did they even move to expel him from our lodge. But like Juan's saying, Freemasonry used to be before the anti-Masonic movement, when there were no such thing as dues cards or proving you were a member by a piece of paper. It truly was a shake of the hand and the honor of your word, and that transcended all. And in England, for the most part, well, a lot of places outside of the U.S., that still exists. So, how do we get back to that? And I think, lifting up these dark taboos and exposing the cancer, those illnesses that we don't readily see the problem on our face, but discover that they do exist, and giving light to that. Well, now we can examine that. We say, you know what? We used to be a magnanimous institution of enlightenment, and we've derailed from that due to being a microcosm of society. But now I don't care if I'm not Worshipful Master. I don't care if I ever get elected to this line or to this office or high priest. I really would care less about a title. There's a bigger agenda here that we as Freemasons need to follow, and move everything else aside and push back forward. Because, we can be that institution that exemplifies a road for humanity to follow to ascend this social prejudice, specifically to the United States. We can, but we have to realize the problem, and we're talking about it now. We have to not be ashamed that it exists. It's a product of humanity. And then we have to say, well, we have these tools. We're going to apply them, and I'm going to hold every single one of my brothers accountable for adhering to them and moving forward. And I think that's how we progress on into where we need to be.
I think one of the issues with that keeps a lot of people from doing that introspection that you recommend, Charles, is the fact that once you pull back the veneer, introspection is painful.
Wow.
It is deeply, deeply painful, and I think it's a lot easier for a lot of brethren, right or wrong, just to sweep it under the rug and say, you know what, we're just not going to deal with this. You shouldn't be talking about that. That's lodge business. It's like, well, we aren't talking about it in lodge either.
Yeah.
And we have to be willing as Masons to accept the pain that is going to come with making ourselves and our fraternity better.
Yeah.
But you know, once we tear away that veil, well, the interesting thing is how your life is enriched by how other brothers or other jurisdictions do the same work. You know, it's the same ritual, but like, for example, here in the Prince Hall Grand Lodge, we end in a certain way that's totally different. And when the AF and AM guys see it, they go like, wow, you know, they try to take that back. Or for example, I belong to both the Southern Scottish Rite jurisdiction and also the Northern jurisdiction, Scottish Rite Prince Hall, which is in Pennsylvania. And the ritual work is somewhat similar, but somewhat different. And right now I'm the Wise and Perfect Master.
Mm-hmm.
So I've enjoyed how my life and I hope that the life of the brothers that I kick it with has been enriched, because I bring stuff from both sides.
Well, Brother Jason, like you're saying, you know, the introspective part, just real quick, you know, each one of us have to go through that. You know, I was fortunate that I had an accident in 2009 that kind of slowed my life down, and I was able to start peeling back layers, and I started to see all these prejudices that I held, and they conflicted with Freemasonry completely. And it was painful. It was a process. But once you get to that point where you realize it and you make all these changes, I think you create such an inertia that it's impossible for those that are of good rapport to not gravitate towards you. Mm-hmm. And I just think we need more of that.
Now, I'm going to ask Gabe. Gabe's been kind of quiet this episode. Since you have been a traveling man and been touring around to other jurisdictions, have you seen anything that's been done successfully to help heal that schism between the brethren?
I think transparency. When issues came up or we knew of issues, we talked about them. Back at my mother lodge back in Honolulu, there was no issue there. There was no issue at all. And if there was an issue with a particular brother or a group of brothers, it was always a discussion, you know. And I think that just being transparent and recognizing, like I said earlier, recognizing your internal conflicts, just like Brother Harper said, and peeling back those layers and getting down to the root of everything, you're able to see things a little bit more clearer. I feel like sometimes we're so close on the mirror, we're so close to it, that we physically can't see, you know, what's really going on.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, does anyone want to add to that about what's working well with certain states and their recognition, and what maybe they could carry those things into the states that aren't?
Well, personally, John, I would say that Texas is a shining example of a way we can push forward. And
in what way?
In the sense that you know, they've extended visitation blanketly. They're actively working, especially, you know, with their Grand Master, to heal the brokenness and the schism between Prince Hall and the Grand Lodge of Texas. And they're just a great example to follow, to say, you know what, you can overcome your history, you can overcome your past, and you can work together as one fraternity, albeit perhaps two different facets of the same organization. And I think a lot of other grand jurisdictions in this country, and, you know, maybe even throughout the world, can really take that example to heart. You know, it makes things a lot easier, especially when you look at members of the Department of Defense who, you know, often deploy to combat zones. You know, 99.9% of the lodges in in forward operating bases and combat zones are Prince Hall lodges, and they are Prince Hall lodges, chartered by, predominantly the Prince Hall Grand Lodge of Oklahoma, which, a number of jurisdictions, including my own, doesn't recognize. So if I were to go abroad and deploy, I wouldn't be able to attend the majority of the military lodges.
Now, I know we've been gone a little bit longer than we normally do. We planned on that. We have a big panel tonight. But I think it's about that time to start honing things in, wrapping things up, and we could talk about this all night for sure. We have such a variety of input. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask that each of the panelists answer kind of this closing question, and then we'll start to take it home from there. And for those who ask questions on social media, we just didn't have time to get to them all. Continue the discussion right there on Facebook, on the event page, and that way we get those things out, we ask those questions to the rest of the brethren who are watching. But for each of the panelists, I'll give you some time to think about this, but I'll put Matt on the spot because he's quick to answer. What is your vision for the future of the craft, specifically in bridging this gap that we have today, and what are the next steps that we will take to get to that goal? So Matt, what do you think?
So Freemasonry and the brethren within Freemasonry used to be trendsetters. We were in the government, we were in business, we were in the social aspect, and we have stopped being trendsetters and boundary breakers within our own organization. We need to get back to that. We need to break boundaries. We need to form relationships and alliances within our own organization. Our organization is fractured. A lot of folks don't want to hear that, and they don't agree with it, but if you have a lodge or a brother that lives next to you or goes to a lodge down the street, you have to consciously ask yourself, especially if you're new to the area, can I go to that lodge? You should never have to ask yourself that question. It's a lodge. It's got the square and compass. You should be able to go right in, give your greeting, and they should welcome you with open arms, and you should do the same for them when they show up on your doorstep.
Mm-hmm.
Going forward, I will do what I always do. I go, I travel, I meet, I greet, and I bring up hard topics whenever I can, because you don't solve a solution by being quiet. Like I said earlier, a closed mouth doesn't get fed. If you don't ask for help, you'll never get help. And if you don't state that there's a problem, no one will see that there's a problem. Because if it's a problem to you, then it's a problem. Just because you think you might be ridiculed doesn't mean you should not ask the question or broach the subject.
All right. Thank you, Brother Bots. Gabe, what's your vision for the future of the craft and its healing of this, and what are the next steps that we should take?
Well, first I want to say that I think the future of the craft is bright as we bring in newer brothers and younger men are coming into the organization who are dealing with issues that maybe 30 years ago that we didn't think were issues. I think that as long as we continue these discussions and we continue to be, positive brothers and actually follow our obligation and be brothers and be our brother's keepers, I think that we'll be headed in the right direction as far as Matt said, being trendsetters and changing that social dogma that kind of overshadows everything. As far as what we can do, I believe that, as far as our actions, as long as we carry our actions in accordance with what we said we would, we'll be okay. I think we'll be okay. I really do. I won't be here 100 years from now, and if I am, God bless me. But absolutely. But I think that we'll be okay. I think we need to continue with the conversations, and then after conversations, we need to start acting. A lot of times we talk about different things, and we keep talking about it, and we keep bringing the same issue with no solutions. I think that as long as we're being open, back away from the mirror, analyzing self, I think that we'll be okay as an organization.
Awesome. Thank you, Gabe. Charles, how about your vision for the future of the craft, and what should we do to get there?
Well, I think the possibilities for the craft are astounding. I honestly do. I've said this before. I think we're at the precipice of a new age of enlightenment, and It is beyond contention that our Masonic philosophies are the instrumental key to progressing society from where it's not just the fraternity, but society from where it's at to where it can be. Now, what is that going to entail? Each individual member becoming rebellious again. As I said before, a title is meaningless. Being a member of the craft is, while it's said to be a privilege, it's technically a responsibility. You're obliging yourself to a great many moral, upright things, and you can't pick one of the things and exclude the other. And in choosing them all, I think in our day and time, you become a rebellious person. I hope my grandmaster isn't. But you become a rebellious person, and I think you have to be convicted in that. And I think that the more that we make members feel comfortable discussing these type of topics that were previously hard to discuss, I think even this episode allows them to realize that these topics can be discussed. We do have all these tools available to us to implement in how we discuss them, and we can progress forward. And so be rebellious. Question everything. Don't let anyone tell you that, oh, well, we can't talk about that, because unless it's specific to politics or religion, that trusted place within a lodge is the place to discuss these things, and not everything Masonic is secret either. We are not just teachers of our own members, but we're teachers to society. So I know I gave a whole bunch there, but it really does take all that. So let's be convicted to that.
No, well said. Thank you. Brother Joe, what is your vision for the future? Now, you have the benefit of having the dual membership and bridging those gaps that other jurisdictions can't as easily. But what do you think the next step should be to get us to that goal?
Well, I think that the forum, tonight's episode is a vision of the future. And it shows how a collective assortment of inquisitive minds can break away that rough ashlar and bring about that nice, perfect ashlar of understanding. That we're all on the level. And once again, I'd just like to thank each and every one of you for hosting this and for having this thing called the Masonic Roundtable. And I hope to continue to be part of it in the future. Thank you so much, everyone.
All right. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for that. You honor us for that, that's for sure. Let's bring it back to the other hosts who've purposefully laid back for most of the episode and give them their final thought and shameless plug as we round things out for the evening, starting with Juan Sepulveda.
Well, one thing that I wanted to point out is there might be brothers listening to this show or watching the video and thinking, why in the world would they choose their 100th episode to talk about racism? And we wanted to take this opportunity to cement the idea with which we started. We are here to talk about some of the difficult things that face our fraternity. We are not here just to entertain each other every Tuesday night, looking at our handsome faces. That's not the purpose. We really want to make sure that, we light a fire on the brothers that are out there to be introspective, as we said. And like Jason said, that's uncomfortable. That's difficult. But if we're honest with ourselves and we're honest with our brothers, we need to be introspective. We need to look at these things that prevent us from reaching that perfection. So racism is one of the things that we need to tackle. It's very difficult because it's not just ingrained we just don't see it in our fraternity, but you can see some of it in our whole society. And if we look at ourselves as the human race and we look at ourselves as citizens of the world, it is our responsibility to take steps every day to chip away at that imperfection, because it's one that prevents us from reaching our highest potential. So I encourage brothers to take to heart what we talked about today and and really try to do what within your power to make sure that we work in our societies, in our lodges, in our fraternity to make sure that we are one. That should be the way forward. So I thank you all, brothers, for listening, and I encourage the participation. Let us know what you think. Go to the MasonicRoundtable.com and post your comments there, because we want this conversation to keep on going and not to end here. So thank you, brothers.
Thank you, Juan. Robert Johnson, final thoughts.
Final thoughts. You talked about this before, John. You said, in the beginning when we talked about this show that we weren't going to stray away from difficult topics. I'm somebody who I've posted some things on our Grand Lodge of Illinois Facebook page before, which have been taken down because they caused. But to me, those things weren't anything more than just a, hey, can we look at this? And I'll say it, it's kind of that good old boy mentality to look at maybe something that I posted, and they'll think, oh, he's causing a ruckus, and some of those people might be in the up and up, and then other people have to deal with those people, and so they just, my stuff's been taken down before, and it's a shame. All we're really trying to do ever is push a difficult subject to get it out in the open, because these are things you can't sweep under the carpet all the time. That does nothing. People say, you hear the comment all the time, which would be, that's not for open discussion. That's an in-lodge discussion, man. I'm unfollowing TMR, right? That is not an in-lodge discussion, because guess what? You're not talking about it in your lodge, because it might not generally affect you or your lodge, so you're like, whatever. We are a progressive science, right? That is a change. I've mentioned it before in some of the old charges. It mentions how you can't be a Mason unless you've taken communion at least once in the last year, right? And then right underneath that it says, these are the rules until such time as we decide to change them. And for something written in the 1400s, how incredibly progressive is that? And we are not exemplifying that today in the least. In most places, we need to. People go back all the time and they say, "Oh, it's in our charge. We can't make innovations." These aren't innovations. The innovation would be not to be progressive.
Right.
It's awful, right? I really enjoyed what Gabe had to say about the mirror and focusing, the introspection, and I've got 3 boys and a daughter, and I think about them in a lodge at some point, and I think in the future, Juan made mention of this one Freemasonry, and while I don't want anybody to get the wrong idea, when we say one Freemasonry, I don't think anybody means like Prince Hall goes away, regular mainstream lodges go away, or there's some amalgamation. I think when I think of one Masonry, I think of, oh yeah. So my sons might all join separate lodges, right? And one might belong to a regular mainstream lodge, one might belong to a Prince Hall lodge, whatever that case is. But they're Masons and they're brothers, and that's all they care about. The affiliation, the AF and AM, the PHA, or the weird DC who uses an and symbol, the A for and. Flavors, right? It's just flavors, and we all do the same thing, and it's so important that we're recognizing that. Kids that are born today, they're not aware of quote-unquote colors or race until they pick it up on the bus or at school or from somebody.
Right.
We have that moral responsibility. Like, I think our generation is one of the first in a long time who are going to have kids that don't grow up to describe somebody like at a gas station and say, oh, there's a Mexican guy over there. Oh, there's a black guy over there. Oh, there's a white guy. They're just gonna be like, there's a guy over there. Because unless you're describing a heinous crime in which you have to catch somebody, there's no reason to even point out any fact. It's a man, right? And I think our kids are going to be one of the first generations to. You'll see a lot more of that. Unfortunately, the racism that's still alive in this country today there are kids who are going to grow up and they're going to be unfortunately, they're not going to grow up having the right ideas, I think, culturally about the world. I think that's all I wanted to say. I love that this episode was our 100th episode. I love that we had all you guys on to share such experience. I had the privilege of talking with Brother Stephen L. Harrison before, and he actually wrote a couple articles about some incidents that happened in lodges involving African American members and the goings on. And it was a real shame when I read the piece. Like, you get infuriated. The piece was called "The Incident," by the way, on Midnight Freemasons, free plug. But it's just incredible that we can come on and do this, and just thanks so much to the panelists and John for being a great moderator here. So with that, I'm on 9:30 on Sunday nights. Whence Came You podcast. It's a Masonic podcast. I hope you guys listen to it. Again, congrats to Bill and Tammy. Couldn't be happier for you. Thank you.
All right, welcome back and Happy New Year for your podcast, Robert.
Oh, thank you.
Alrighty, Jason, final thoughts.
Sure. So as several of the brethren and the hosts have mentioned, when we decided to make the Masonic Roundtable a regular thing back in February of 2014, the very first topic that was requested was actually racism. Someone said, would you please talk about racism? And that was a really that was a big defining moment in our conceptual framework of the show, where we said, okay, what kind of a show are we actually going to be? And unanimously, we said, you know what, we are going to be a show for the betterment of this fraternity, no matter what, no matter who is listening. And so I can't thank everybody enough for coming onto the show and talking about your experiences, but more so just giving brethren around the world from all walks of life encouragement to say, you know what, yes, this is a problem. Yes, even today it is a problem, but yes, we can move past it, and we will move past it. And I think that's the best thing that I can impart, is just an exhortation to brethren everywhere to say, let's move past the color of our skin, because it doesn't have any bearing whatsoever on the quality of the man. The internal, not the external qualities of the man are what we appreciate and what we value in this fraternity. Let's start living that every single day.
Thank you, Jason. Let's let Nick hop in. Hey, there he is. He didn't come.
I want it to be noted that underneath my face says Senior Grand Warden. That will be the first and last time that ever happens. So I'm just letting you all know that for today, I am now the top dog here. So, for me, it's kind of interesting because I think it was pointed out, having Right Worship Brother Joe here and I, that here in Minnesota, it's become almost a flavoring. We really don't regard the two different Grand Lodges in anything other than just different flavors of the same in the same ice cream shop, and it's great. It's so it is. It's kind of bizarre to explain it to the rest of the world that I just go over to the Prince Hall guys and hang out with them, and Joe's secretary of a AF and AM lodge. Nobody cares. He earned the Hiram Award in that one, but he's also almost top dog in the other one, and people here, it doesn't matter. And so when you explain that to the rest of the world, they're like, what? This can't possibly exist. This scenario, and it does, and it can happen. And so I think my vision of the craft is to come to Minnesota, all of you, live here, don't screw it up, and it'll be great. So, I think we're breaking down lines. the media, even just 3 years ago, wouldn't show an interracial couple very often. Well, not 3 years ago, but before
Right.
the current POTUS that we have, right?
Mm-hmm.
Interracial couples are very rare that you'd see that. Now, it's common. You have shows like Fresh Off the Boat and all those other ones that are, a common stay. Modern Family with a normal gay couple that, it's just acts normal. The rapidness in which we are changing has been astounding, and it's also frustrating for a lot of people. And so I think that's what we're seeing now, is that it's a clash of cultures that never existed before, and so it's amazing, And yes, Blackish too. You cannot forget that one because it's flippin' hilarious. But and that's the thing. I think what's happening now is that, at least in Masonry, we're a microcosm of, and this is going to sound terrible, oldness. We don't evolve as quickly as the rest of society. So when society changes, we change 20 years later. And it's just, now it's happening rapidly, and the old guys don't like it. And not all old guys, but some of the old guys. So we're just having a lot of crises of identity and culture. But it's going to get better. And it's going to get better just because the outside of the temple, the profaneness, affect within the temple. Wow. And it's just what we have to deal with. And I don't think there's any proactive steps that we necessarily have to take, because they're already being done for us. So, that's really all I have for final thoughts. My blog, millennialfreemason.com. Promise I'll write on it one of these days.
All right. Thank you, Nick. Before I get to the final part of this evening, I'm going to open it up. I know Charles had one last shameless plug he wanted to give.
I do have one. Well, yeah, one of many. So I just conferred with Gate City Lodge number 2 in Atlanta, Georgia, April 8th at 7 p.m. They will be hosting me in a presentation, and I think they're going to make it a public presentation. We'll have information about that. Also, the books Freemasonry Black and White and A Spurious State of Confusion. I've had the assistance of Greg McCarney, and we're consolidating the books to make them more convenient as far as the presentation of information. And that book, that volume should be coming out within the next couple months. And also with the show, Black and White, A Man Divided. I've had the great opportunity to work with a 5-time Grammy Award winner, Malik Youssef, and other recording artists such as Tatiana and Tone Houston, and even Robert Allen, who's actually a member of Rob and I's my jurisdiction in Illinois. We're going to be presenting a tour hopefully this spring. So we have a lot of things going on to confront this epidemic of social prejudice that is unfortunately a breeding ground for violence and confrontation. So we're definitely trying to stem that, and I think the elements of Masonic philosophy is the foundation to do that. So hopefully I'll see you guys in the future. If anybody wants more information on the show, MalikYousefJones.com. If anybody wants to engage me as a speaker, CharlesMHarperSr.com. And I appreciate you guys having me on the show, truly.
All right. Thank you very much, brother. As for my final thoughts, first, a big thank you to our guest host tonight. There's so much to cover in so little time. Maybe we can make this another sequel in the future. And do stay tuned for episode 200. 100 from now, we do have a topic in mind, and so I'm not kidding about that. We know exactly what we're going to talk about in episode 200. How do you find out? You wait. So, but I think what's been alluded to, and it's kind of a saying that goes around here, is that we need to wait for a few more funerals to make progressive change in the fraternity. And so there's a little bit of morbid nature to that, but there's also some truth in that some mindsets just will not change. It's dependent on the individual to change their mindset, and there is a generational difference, and that sometimes that we have to wait some of these things out. We can make the change at a very tactical level, but when you have those mindsets in Grand Lodge positions, when you have those mindsets in leadership positions, you need to do more to influence that change. So the other thing I wanted to add is that we talk a lot about traditions, and my biggest thing is that we have traditions and we have history, right? You can change traditions, as Matt Botts said earlier. You can change it as often as you change your underwear. But we all have history, right? We can still hold on to the past and remember it for what it teaches you, but that does not give you an excuse to continue a tradition that doesn't make sense. So keep that in mind. Another theme I heard in tonight's episode was suck it up, right? In the sense of change starts at home. The infamous Gandhi quote, be the change you wish to see in the world, right? So do the right thing. Do the right thing always. That's kind of a mantra that I stick to. So suck it up, do the right thing, speak out. If you see something, say something. I'm just going to mix all these together because they all get to the core of change happens now, right now. So with that, excellent episode, brethren. Thank you very much for watching. Hope to see you in future episodes, and keep searching for more light. Have a good night.